All right, day two. Very excited to have everyone here this morning. Thank you for waking up early and joining us. Just want to say thank you so much, Sharla, Stephani, for being here. These are two wonderful women I've had the opportunity to get to know over the past year. Sharla started her practice back in July of 2023 and was at Hint Summit last year, and we built a relationship then. And Stephani in her practice at EGS Marketing, she's been a part of the Hint ecosystem over the past year and someone I've been able to learn from, and excited to kind of ask for her knowledge here today. So we're going to jump right into it. We hope to get through a few questions, and then we really want to open it up for the audience to dive in and ask questions away. So to get started, ICP is what we're talking about. That is your ideal customer profile. Also, your member is really a way to look at it. Stephani, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and kind of what goes into it?
Sure. So when you're talking about your ICP, in basic terms, you're really just describing who you want to attract to your practice. Who is that ideal member that you want to work with? There are many terms in marketing speak or lingo that kind of fly around. Target market is one of them, but that's not really very specific enough. It's too broad in general. You want to think more in terms of persona or avatar. And I prefer the avatar description of it because when we develop an avatar, it gets super specific, so much so that we even name this person. We give this person a name. You're creating a fictional character that represents who you want to work with and attract to your practice. So I would ask you, if you could clone your favorite member or put them on repeat, what does that person look like? What are the details that describe them? And then you will love what you do because you love everybody you work with.
Awesome, thanks. So Sharla, now that we kind of understand what the ICP is, let's dive into your specific one. You know, and you started your practice a year and a half ago, and what was it like when you built out your ICP?
So when I first started, a little bit about my background. I was 10 years in the system, so I've spent 3 years in a private practice, 5 years at a hospital system. I came from a super busy practice. I've had 4,000 patients. My schedules were booked out. Like I had a baby and I came back, my schedules were booked out 6 months. So when I first decided to do this, my husband and I talked about it, and he was really supportive. But then, it was just, I had to be successful. Like, I have to make this work. I can't go back to the system because otherwise I'm just going to quit medicine because I was really miserable. So at first, I felt like I have this huge practice, and on day one, 300 people followed me, and I wasn't really specific about my ideal patient. But then over time, and probably everybody who's in here, you know those people, there's about 10 to 20% of your people who take 90% of your time. And they make it feel like you are back in the system, kind of, you know what I mean? So, and then over the last year, I've really been able to hone down on my ideal patient even more. And then each individual service that I offer now, it has its own ideal patient. So then it's not just one specific person. And then when we were asked to give this talk, Stephani and I got together, and we actually did a 2-hour session together where I went through and I was much more detailed how she goes through it with everybody that she works with. And to be honest, I feel like it was definitely more detailed than I had ever gotten into. Being able to name the person, I was thinking about one particular person in my practice, and surprisingly, it's a lot not different than me and the person that I am. But it was just a really interesting exercise to be able to see that even though I didn't go to the detail that Stephani does at that point, it was funny that I had that person in my mind. So I think that over time, your ideal patient can definitely change and grow, and it can change and grow with each individual service that you offer. You just have to feel like you're being able to feel valued by that person, and you are able to give value to that person.
So I think the question everyone in the room is wondering is, what is your avatar's name?
My avatar's name is Lori.
Lori, perfect. So I love that. Something that you mentioned is honing down into that kind of specific person and that avatar. Stephani, as we think about kind of building out your ICP, why is it so important to really niche down like that and be really hyper-specific? Do you have any kind of thoughts around that?
Yeah, sure. So from a marketing perspective, there are many benefits to being very specific and detailed. One of them is that it's going to help you create a message that will connect to your target member. And when you can create that message that they resonate with, it helps you shorten the sales cycle and allows you to not be salesy in your approach to speaking with them, because it's just going to make sense. It's going to feel right. And when you shorten that message and they do say yes, and they become a member, then you're going to create longer lasting, stronger relationships and reduce the churn in your practice because, well, basically all of your members are the right fit, right? It's who you want to work with. And that's when I would say that I like to use the phrase, you want to dig an inch wide, but a mile deep. That's where we're going to get really specific with the person you want to work with. An inch wide is that narrow focus on Lori or whoever your avatar is. And that's where you get really deep in that message. You understand exactly what their pain points are, how you resolve those through your practice. And by connecting on that deep layer, you're able to just resonate with them, and it makes it an easier yes for your practice. And the opposite of that, basically by staying too broad and too generic, maybe you're going an inch deep and a mile wide. You know, if you think of a visual representation of that, you're not going to be noticed. There's so many marketing messages out there. There's so many options out there for services. You need to be memorable, and they need to want to work with you. So by being specific and deep, that's creating something that'll help them say yes to you.
The other thing that I loved that we talked about, Stephanie, is what pain points are they going through and what am I able to offer them, and so how they feel before my practice and how I want them to feel or how they feel after they join my practice. And I loved that. And it also changed my perspective on the care that I'm being able to offer people too.
Awesome. So kind of diving into more of the demographics that go around a specific ICP, do you want to share a little bit around that, Stephanie? And Sharla, maybe you can give your thoughts as well. The specific demographics, yeah.
Yeah, so when you're building your ICP, a lot of people stop with the basic demographics and maybe the key purchase drivers. And then once you have these general details and you know who to target, then you think you're done. But I would say that's not right. You want to go very, very deep with them. And as you described, we go into the concept of what are their pain points? What are their frustrations and fears? What's keeping them up at night? What do they really, really need solved in their lives? On the opposite of that, what do they want? What are their hopes and dreams and their aspirations? Because when you go deep into these emotional factors and the things that really drive them to do what they do, then that's where you're going to connect with them in that deeper way. And you're going to get into their core purpose and values in life. And that's when they're going to say, yes, you know me, you get me, because you're speaking to them in those terms. And they're going to feel like, wow, nobody's ever talked to me this way before. How do you know me? And then that increases your trust level with them, that know, like, trust factor. And that's where that conversion is easier, and it's easier to go into their why and connect with them on those levels. I would say that if you stay too broad and too general, then you are not speaking to anyone, right? If you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to no one. And so that's where creating these layers and going deeper into their why helps you. And as you said, we do the before and after, so paint a picture of their lives. What is their life like before working with you? What is their life like after? What's an average day like? What's a really bad day like? How do you solve those particular problems through your services, right? We're not solving everything, right? We can't take the chaos out of a mom's life because she's got kids and everything's busy. But you can solve some of her problems through your services, and that's what you need to focus on. And so then we talk about the after. What is that magical life that they're looking at? What do you do to help resolve those particular problems? And when you can help them paint the picture of that after, then of course they're going to say, I've got to have that. And it's going to make your practice be a must-have. You don't have to fight the conversation of, well, why do I need you if I have insurance? They're going to say, I want you, regardless of whether I have insurance or not.
So Sharla, talking a little bit more about your growth, her practice, Clark DPC, or Clark Family Care, has grown quite a bit over the past year, and having a well-defined ICP has been a part of that. But do you want to talk a little bit more about how the ICP has maybe changed as you've added on new growth strategies, practices, things of that nature?
Yeah, I think my biggest struggle over the last year is, again, I talked about not being narrow enough, and I do feel like my biggest struggles over the last year is when I veered away from my ICP. So there was one huge example that's not a great example. So back in December, my nurse was away. I can't remember. I was there in my office by myself, answering the phones, seeing the patients. You guys all know. You guys all do it. So I answered the phone, and it was a Friday afternoon, and this guy just seemed very distraught and, woe is me, and whatever. He had this sob story, right? And I just had an uneasy feeling about it, but I felt like I was the only one that could help him because all of the other system has just turned them away, him and his dad. So I agreed to take them. I even, my schedules are super full now, but I was like, I will make time for you on Monday, come in. It was even worse on Monday. I just felt like I was so terrible. And then, I discovered a lot of stuff. I saved this guy's life. But then over the course of 2 months, every single day was 2 to 3 hours spent on these people. 2 to 3 hours, I'm not kidding. And then finally, I didn't give them pain medications, and they got really mad, and they threatened me and threatened to bring a gun to the clinic. So I just felt so uneasy. I look back at those 2 to 3 months, and every time that person would message me and demand that I called them back and message me on a Saturday that I had to call them back. I felt like that experience, yes, it gave me a little bit of trauma, and maybe I locked my door a lot more frequently, but I just realized I have to stick to my ideal client. I cannot go back to a system where I can't say no to taking people. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, to be able to make the practice how I want it to be.
And as you grew the practice and added on new services, how did you have to change your ICP in order to kind of be successful with those new services?
So I've added aesthetics to my practice, and then we're in the process of, adding a tier of longevity. And I've definitely realized aesthetics started out very slow, and it was because I had a very specific ICP for my direct primary care, and that didn't necessarily translate over. And now I've learned, even every service that I provide in aesthetics, I have my own ICP. So then I can really speak to, and this is even less, more uncomfortable as doing aesthetics than direct primary care, is not having to be salesy, because you really have to say, what is this person's pain point? What value can I add? I'm not just saying, just give me all your money. I'm saying, you have a problem, I have the solution. If that's where you find value, then that we can meet in the middle, and I feel like both of us can get what we need to out of this relationship.
Perfect. So along with growth comes hiring as well. And as we just learned from Dr. Anderson, hiring and finding the right team and building a leadership group is challenging, but it's also really rewarding. When you're thinking about hiring for those ICPs, what are some of the thoughts that come to mind?
For a year, it was just me and one RN, and then I started growing, and it was harsh, to say the least. But so now, as of last month, I have 3 nurses, and I just hired a nurse practitioner. And looking back at it and being very specific at it, and that last talk was so good because that just really resonated with me. And I just realized that I needed to grow as a leader. But hiring those 3 nurses, I got them, and they were the right people. But then I was able to take all the 3 services that I offer and make a roles and responsibility, and I had those 3 people even interview for the job that they wanted within the company. And I picked the nurse for the ICP that I felt like they would do the best with, that they would offer the best value to that client and that patient. And then my nurse practitioner, I think that there's 2 ways to look at it when you're bringing a mid-level or another physician in. You can go to a different ICP and hire for a different ICP. For me, I really wanted to reproduce myself and be able to share the responsibility with the nurse practitioner, and really just make it a cohesive team instead of having a whole different panel. So I really sought out very specifically to find somebody that would match my ICP, that they would get along with the best, and that she really was able to practice the same way as I was, and luckily I found the most perfect person that I probably could have ever found. So excellent.
Awesome. It's really interesting because when you think about it a little bit, it's like you've built this practice around what you love, enjoy, and what's important to you, right? You have the people working with you that have the same values, passions. You have the patients or the members that are joining your practice who are interested in the same things and want the same things. And now when you go to work every day, you're probably smiling and you're enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely. And I did Hint Thrive, and that definitely saved my whole business, by the way. Lauren is amazing. So we always talked about that I didn't want to create my own prison. And I know that everybody has in here, like those people that have experienced how the system works and insurance-based practices, and it was literally just killing me. And I just felt like I was going to prison every day, and I couldn't get out of this cycle. And so then when all those 300 people followed me, then some of those people make me feel like I'm building my own prison, that I'm building up the walls of my own prison. So then when you're very specific about the different ICPs and what you enjoy and where you find the most value and get that out of that relationship, then that prison goes away and you actually enjoy medicine again, which is surprising.
Perfect. So we're going to do one last question. This is a little bit more shifting to digital transformation, what's happening in the space. I'd like to hear your thoughts from both of this, but the idea is, as kind of the digital landscape continues to transform every single day, what are some of the things to keep in mind with regards to your ICP? How do you think about communicating with them, interacting with them, keeping them up to speed, things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know we live in a digital transformation right now. The world is changing faster than we can keep up with it. Technology's changing. I like to say we're in an ADHD world where you have 0.2 seconds to grab somebody's attention, and if you're not there and able to communicate with them in the way that they want you to, then they'll just pass you on and you go to the next person. So the technologies that allow you to text with your, not only your current members, but your potential members. We are talking about marketing, right? So the leads, you want to be able to communicate with them how they want to be communicated with. Nobody wants a phone call anymore. Yes, some people do call. You have to be able to accept both, but being able to be on the cusp of the technology, whether it's AI and communicating with them instantly and giving that instant feedback of, oh, I'm getting my message now. You could have chatbots and AI responses, even if it is something as simple as, we'll get back to you in just a moment. I'm, with a member right now, or what they want to hear, I'm with another patient. So whatever that message is, be able to be willing to try new tech and new communication tools to make sure that you can communicate with your potential members like they want to be communicated with.
And I think that that's where my ICP has come into play too, because some of the people in my practice don't really want to do technology. They just want to phone call, you know what I mean? And they want to call the clinic incessantly. So being able to really guide them through that too, and because I still have to get value out of that relationship, even though they're not like that perfect mold for me, I feel like technology is the way that I can really help people come into like my practice and where I can find value.
Yeah, and for me and my DPC doctors out here, Dr. Army, hey. I love to communicate with him through Spruce and his whole office, and everyone's super responsive, and it's really easy for me as a patient to connect with them. So it's awesome to have that technology, and as things continue to change and you start to market to your members in that way, things will come up, new social media outlets, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think it's fun to play with those tools as a marketer. That's like the most interesting aspect of what we do, and I'm really excited to kind of open it up to the group here for questions. Before that, though, by a show of hands. Oh, good.
Add one quick thing.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it on the flip side of that, if your ICP happens to be the older population that isn't comfortable with all the technology and the phones and the texting, then that's where you would need to focus on communication methods that they prefer to use. So no matter who your ICP or avatar or target market is, that's where you have to be able to be customized and willing to work with the people that you work with.
Cool, so before we jump into questions, by a show of hands, who feels like they have a pretty solid ICP for their practice? Nick, awesome, cool. So we got work to do, that's awesome. All right.
I don't have a question, just really a comment. So I've been in business and working in my field for 35 years. So for all the new DPC docs, starting your practice or the established ones, the only advice I have for you, and I don't really have a good word to say or use, but you have to have a no a-hole rule. No a-hole rule clients, no a-hole rule for vendors, no a-hole rule for your employees. That will make you have an easier path in your life.
I wish you would have told me that before December.
Got a question in the back.
Thank you for the talk. I have a question that's a little bit touchy, but I think it's important. I think part of our ethics as physicians is to take and see whoever needs us to care for them. And I think that one of the criticisms levied against DPC is that we cherry pick, which I don't think we do. But when we have a conversation about your ideal patient, how do we dovetail that with our principles and that criticism? I mean, the patient that you had that threatened your life is just criminal and not what I'm talking about. But I just wonder how we can walk that line between practicing the medicine we love without being seen to cherry pick for the most profitable patient.
I think the biggest thing that I've had to come to grip with, so I mean, I get where you're talking about, and that's why I took those patients, right? I feel there's a lot of patients that I've taken that is like, I am the only person that understands them. They say, oh, you're the only one who's ever listened to me. Oh, like, they just, we hear all the time. However, you also have to be okay and be realistic and say, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because the patients that I had in my old practice were literally sucking the life from me. And I started to feel, and maybe this makes me a bad physician and a bad person, but I really started to resent my patients. And that made me a worse doctor because then I was a little bitey. Like they would call in for, oh, just like do this for free for me. And like, I can just leave a urine sample and you'll just do everything. And everything is for free. And that's how I felt in the insurance-based world, and I could feel myself getting to there. And when I feel that with a patient, even though they might be a patient, I've never fired anybody from my practice, but I feel like I start feeling that from patients. So another example is like it's somebody who I thought maybe would probably meet my ideal patient, to be honest with you, and I diagnosed her with Graves' disease, and I spent 2 weeks of like tons of stuff, and she had no insurance, and I did all this research, and I got all this stuff, and I was calling the endocrinologist, and I did all this stuff for her, and in the end, she canceled her membership because instead of my prices, she went to somebody else who was a little bit cheaper down the road. And she was messaging me all the time, I'm still having palpitations, I'm still doing this, and I could feel myself being resentful towards her, and she then all of a sudden didn't become my ideal patient. And I don't feel like I should feel bad about that. Like I just need to realize like that is my personality, but I still need to find joy in my journey, and I cannot build my own prison. Like that's one thing that I refuse to do. So if I feel myself feeling like that, then I'm not getting one out of the relationship that I need, and then I'm not going to be the right fit for that patient either.
I could also add to that as well. When you're really focused on your ideal member, it doesn't mean that you're not going to attract people outside of that. So it helps you focus your marketing message. It gives you concepts to add to your website, to your social media, to your ad campaigns that speak to the people that you really want to reach. But it doesn't mean those other people won't find you and come to you as well. It just helps you attract more of the right people. And then it's up to you to decide how many of the other people would you still accept and what kind of space you have in your practice.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I actually have maybe a dozen avatars. How would you recommend, because I inherently like the variety, I do well with variety, is there a way to build that into my marketing?
Yes. So when you talk about the avatars, can I ask you a return question? Is it based on your services or, okay, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I have a primarily urgent care practice, and I love taking care of kids and the busy mom that doesn't want to take their kid in. I do house calls. I also love the elderly population. So vastly different.
Okay, so for each of those different avatars, I would say you speak to those on those service pages, or you could even have a who we work with section where you can call out the specific needs of those different types of people and use cases. So beyond your website, you can create social media content that are specific to those individual populations, and that'll give you a ton of content to build off of. So you'll have social media for months. And then as well as those ad campaigns, you would want to create a specific campaign for each target, and that way you can get very detailed on what they are looking for and the ways you can support them. And then when you're targeting those ad campaigns, you would go to maybe the different age demographics, different areas, different problems in life. So interests and all of those targeting features, that's where you would use your avatars to help you get deeper into your ad targeting.
And I'm not an expert by any means, but if it were me, I have found it easier, especially like with the sticks, I have to market that more. I have found that focusing on one at a time, like I choose one that I want to grow, right? So I do a vaginal rejuvenation with urinary incontinence treatments. I have found that when I do that and I grow that, then it grows. And then now I can like focus on something different, and I can do the social media and the marketing and all that stuff to one specific thing at one time.
Cool.
And back to the ad campaign, the amount of ads that you can run at any one time is very heavily dependent on your budget. You don't want to dilute your budget so much that each individual ad isn't getting visibility because you're not spending enough on the platform. So just as Sharla said, you don't have to run campaigns for every demographic or every avatar at one time. You can choose one and switch it up and keep your ads fresh in that way.
Cool. Well, we have time for one more question if anyone would like to jump in. Cool.
I'm curious as to your percent of revenue, what your marketing budget is. We talking 3 to 5%?
Depends on where you're at, right? So at first,
Yes.
I was a lot more percentage. I would say it's about 5%.
Thank you.
You're making her do math in her head. Yes. And I would add to that, I don't have a blanket statement of how much your revenue should be that you need to invest into your practice. It's very, very specific to your area. Some people have a lot of competition. Some people don't have very much competition at all. So that is very customized according to that individual practice.
And luckily, I didn't really spend anything on direct primary care. It was all word of mouth. So like once I started, then it was everybody. I've only had about, other than that 300, I've only had probably 20 other people from my old practice come, and everything else I've grown to 500, which feels very, very busy. But that is all 100% word of mouth. I've spent $0 on that side.
Yeah. And there are so many different marketing tactics that cost no dollars at all. We host marketing office hours at Hint, and we have awesome accelerator programs and things of that nature. So we're happy to chat with you more about that and kind of give you those shared successes.
And when you do go to other avenues of marketing, whether it's offline marketing, such as the networking events that you're a part of, getting out in your community, having your own members share referral campaigns or word of mouth, being able to be specific with your ICP is great in those other avenues of marketing too that don't cost you anything. So knowing exactly who you want to work with gives you something to go on and be very clear and specific when you're developing an elevator pitch and you have 15 seconds to maybe a minute to talk about who you are, what you do, and who you serve. Being really clear about that helps you be more efficient and be able to present in a better, clear way.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for today. Appreciate you all.
So much.